The sky bleeds crimson and violet, colors that should never exist together, yet somehow do in this place where reality itself has been wounded. Jagged spires of crystallized screams pierce upward through ground that pulses with a rhythm disturbingly close to a heartbeat. In the distance, mountains made of compacted bone and sinew shift positions when no one watches them directly, their movements leaving trails of impossible geometry burned into the air itself. This is a demon world, a place where the Imperium has torn through the fabric of real space and remained, festering like an open wound in the galaxy's flesh. On worlds like these, the very laws of physics become suggestions rather than rules, subject to the whims of entities that exist beyond mortal comprehension. Time flows backward and forward simultaneously. Gravity pulls in directions that don't exist in normal space. The ground beneath your feet might be solid stone one moment and composed of frozen whispers the next. Forests grow here, but their trees are made of calcified terror, their leaves dripping with concentrated despair. Rivers run through these twisted landscapes, but what flows through them is not water. It's liquid malice, concentrated suffering given form and motion. Into this nightmare realm, something golden has fallen, something that doesn't belong, something that represents everything these corrupted spaces were meant to destroy. It lies half buried in the shifting, screaming soil, its auramite plating dulled by centuries of exposure to the warp's corrosive touch, but still intact, still recognizable for what it is to those with the knowledge to see. A Contemptor Galatus Dreadnought of the Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's personal guardians, lies dormant on a demon world, and it is not alone in this terrible place. From the swirling miasma of warp-touched atmosphere, a sound emerges. Not the cacophony of demon howls, or the whispered temptations that constantly echo across these cursed landscapes. No, this sound is different. It's raucous, joyful, utterly out of place in this realm of calculated cruelty. It's laughter, orc laughter, specifically, that particular brand of aggressive mirth that only the greenskins can produce. The sound of beings who find violence hilarious and combat the most entertaining thing in existence. They've arrived on this demon world not through careful planning or strategic calculation, because orcs don't do either of those things. They're here because their ramshackle space hulk, held together by equal parts scrap metal and unshakable belief, got caught in a warp storm and spat out in this location. And rather than being horrified by their surroundings like any sensible species would be, the orcs are absolutely delighted. A place where the very environment wants to kill you? That sounds like a proper good fight to them. But this story isn't really about how they got here. It's about what happens next. It's about the moment when two of the Imperium's most formidable forces, one noble and one savage, one refined to the absolute peak of genetic perfection, and the other a crude weapon of war left over from conflicts millions of years old, come together in the absolute worst possible location. It's about what happens when orcs, with their reality-warping belief systems and their insatiable hunger for loot and violence, discover a treasure beyond their wildest dreams, sitting abandoned on a world where madness is the natural state of being. This is the story of what happens when orcs find a Custodian Dreadnought on a demon world. And the answer to that question is far stranger, far more violent, and far more fascinating than you might expect. The nature of demon worlds. To understand what makes this encounter so extraordinary, we first need to understand exactly what demon worlds are and why they represent some of the most dangerous locations in the entire galaxy. These are not merely planets that have been conquered by chaos forces. They are not worlds where Chaos Space Marines have set up bases, or where cultists worship the dark gods. Those places, terrible as they may be, still operate under the fundamental laws of reality. Demon worlds are something else entirely. They are places where the boundary between the materium and the immaterium has been torn apart completely, where the warp has permanently flooded into real space and remained. They are islands of impossibility, pockets of literal nightmare made manifest, sustained by the constant attention of the chaos gods themselves or by powerful demon princes who have claimed them as their personal domains. The process by which a world becomes a demon world is catastrophic. Usually, it begins with a massive incursion of chaos forces, a sustained assault by demons and their mortal followers that weakens the barrier between dimensions. This might happen through the opening of warp rifts during massive battles, through the performance of terrible rituals by chaos cultists, or through the emergence of the planet itself from prolonged exposure to warp storms. Once the barrier is sufficiently weakened, the warp doesn't just touch the world, it floods it, saturating every atom with the raw stuff of chaos. What happens next defies description in conventional terms. The physical laws that govern normal reality begin to unravel. Mountains might start bleeding. Oceans could transform into vast pools of liquid emotion. The sky itself becomes a canvas upon which the dark gods paint their twisted visions. Cities warp and twist into impossible architecture that hurts to look at directly. Living beings caught in this transformation fare even worse, their flesh and minds twisted into new forms that serve the whims of their new masters. Each demon world is unique, shaped by which of the chaos gods holds dominance over it, or by the particular obsessions of the demon prince who rules it. A world claimed by Horn becomes an endless battlefield, its surface scarred by infinite war, its rivers running with blood that never stops flowing, its inhabitants locked in eternal combat. A Nurgle Daemon world transforms into a garden of pestilence, where diseases take on physical form and wander the landscape, where the very ground is composed of decomposing matter that somehow continues to decay forever without ever disappearing completely. Slaanesh Daemon worlds are perhaps the most disturbing to contemplate, places where sensation itself has been amplified to levels that would shatter mortal minds, where pleasure and pain have become so intertwined that they're indistinguishable, where the inhabitants experience ecstasies and agonies simultaneously in endless cycles. Tzeentch Daemon worlds are labyrinths of constantly shifting reality, where cause and effect become suggestions, where the future and past coexist with the present, where truth is mutable and lies can become reality simply through the act of speaking them. But not all demon worlds belong to a single god. Many are contested territories, battlegrounds where the forces of all four dark powers wage eternal war against each other for control. These might actually be even more dangerous than single-god demon worlds, because the conflicting energies create zones of complete chaos, where reality doesn't just bend, it shatters completely. You might step forward and find yourself transported to a different location entirely. You might swing your weapon and have it age 1,000 years in the time it takes to complete the arc. You might breathe in air and exhale something that isn't a gas at all, isn't even matter as conventional physics would define it. The inhabitants of demon worlds are equally varied and terrifying. Demons themselves can manifest with ease here, maintaining their presence in real space without the constant expenditure of energy that would normally be required. They patrol these twisted landscapes, hunting for souls to devour or torment. Mortal followers of chaos might be found here too, either those who willingly came seeking power, or those who were unfortunate enough to be trapped when the world transformed. These mortals rarely remain entirely human for long. The constant exposure to warp energies mutates them, twisting their bodies and minds into new forms that might eventually transcend mortality entirely, or might simply drive them into gibbering madness. What makes demon worlds particularly relevant to our story is that they are also treasure troves of sorts, not in the conventional sense of wealth or resources, although those might exist in twisted forms. No, demon worlds often contain remnants of what came before the transformation. Ancient imperial installations might still stand, their architecture warped, but their contents sometimes intact. Battlefields from conflicts that occurred before the demon world's creation might dot the landscape, littered with weapons and vehicles and war machines from various factions. These relics of the material universe become prizes to be claimed, either by Daemon princes seeking to add to their collections or by the mortal champions who serve them. And this brings us to the specific demon world where our story takes place. We don't know its original name, if it ever had one. We don't know which of the chaos gods currently holds dominance over it, if any single one does. What we do know is that somewhere on this world, half buried in soil that screams when disturbed, lies a Contemptor Galatus Dreadnought of the Adeptus Custodes, and that changes everything. The Custodian Dreadnought, a marvel of Imperial engineering. To appreciate what the Orks have discovered, we need to understand exactly what a Custodian Dreadnought represents. These are not the standard dreadnoughts used by the Space Marine chapters, as impressive as those might be. These are something far more advanced, far more powerful, and far more rare. A Custodian Dreadnought is to a standard dreadnought what a Custodian is to a Space Marine, which is to say, it exists on an entirely different level of capability and craftsmanship. The Adeptus Custodes, the 10,000 golden warriors who serve as the Emperor's personal bodyguards, are the pinnacle of human enhancement. Each Custodian is a work of art, crafted through genetic manipulation and alchemical treatments that make the process of creating a Space Marine look crude by comparison. Where Space Marines are mass-produced warriors, each Custodian is unique, shaped individually to be as close to perfection as the Emperor's arts could achieve. They are stronger, faster, more intelligent, and more skilled than any Space Marine could hope to be. A single Custodian could face down multiple Astartes and expect to win. But even Custodians can fall in battle. Their bodies, as enhanced as they are, remain ultimately mortal. When wounds too grievous for even their remarkable physiology to recover from are inflicted, when a Custodian faces death, they are sometimes offered a choice. They can die with honor, their service complete, or they can continue their eternal vigil in a different form. They can be interred within a dreadnought. This is not a choice made lightly. For a Custodian, interment within a dreadnought sarcophagus is explicitly described as the act of a martyr. The process is brutal and irreversible. The dying Custodian has all unnecessary flesh stripped away, reduced to little more than a collection of vital organs and a brain suspended in an amniotic tank. What remains is then permanently fused with the dreadnought systems, becoming as much a part of the machine as the machine becomes a part of them. They will never feel the sun on their face again. They will never taste food or drink. They will never walk freely or touch another being with their own hands. Everything that made them physically human is gone, replaced by servos and sensors and weapons systems. Yet they choose this fate because their duty to the Emperor demands it. Because even in this twilight existence, they can continue to serve. Because the skills and knowledge they've accumulated over centuries of service are too valuable to lose. And because a Custodian Dreadnought is one of the most formidable war machines in the entire Imperium. The Contemptor Galatus variant that lies on this demon world represents a specific design philosophy within the Custodian Guard. Where some dreadnought patterns focus on ranged firepower or on being walking fortresses, the Contemptor Galatus is designed as a close combat specialist. It's built to advance into melee range and hold that position against overwhelming opposition, serving as an anchor point for the Custodian battle line. Its primary armament is the Galatus Warblade, a massive power sword sized appropriately for a dreadnought. This isn't just a scaled-up version of a normal power weapon. The Galatus Warblade is a masterwork of artifice, capable of cleaving through ranks of armored enemies with each swing. The power field that envelops the blade can disrupt molecular bonds on contact, allowing it to cut through materials that would normally be impervious to conventional weapons. Backed by the dreadnought's hydraulic strength, a single swing from this weapon could bisect a battle tank. Built into the Galatus Warblade are twin-linked Infernus incinerators, flame weapons that can immolate entire squads of infantry or purge enemies from fortified positions. These aren't standard flamers. They produce flames hot enough to melt ceramite armor, sustained by plasma cores that draw power directly from the Dreadnought's main reactor. The Custodians use these weapons with surgical precision, knowing exactly where to apply flame to maximum effect. The Contemptor Galatus's other arm mounts a Presidium shield, a defensive weapon system unlike anything found in standard Imperial arsenals. This isn't merely a physical shield, although it certainly functions as one. It's auramite construction capable of deflecting even heavy weapons fire. The Presidium shield also projects a powerful refractor field that can dissipate incoming energy attacks and disrupt the molecular structure of projectiles. When combined with the Dreadnought's already formidable armor, this makes the Contemptor Galatus almost impossible to damage through conventional means. The armor itself deserves special mention. Where standard dreadnoughts might be constructed from ceramite or adamantium, Custodian dreadnoughts are sheathed in auramite, a material whose exact composition is one of the Emperor's closely guarded secrets. Auramite is lighter than adamantium, yet stronger, more resistant to both physical and energy weapons, and possesses an unusual resistance to the corrupting touch of chaos. This last property is particularly relevant, given where this dreadnought currently rests. Inside the armored sarcophagus, at the Dreadnought's heart, lies the Custodian himself. Or, rather, what remains of him after the interment process. We don't know this warrior's name, don't know what battles he fought before his injury, don't know if he's been conscious during his time on this demon world, or if his systems have kept him in suspended animation. What we do know is that his mind, that warrior's consciousness shaped by centuries of training and combat, remains intact. And should his systems reactivate, that mind would immediately assess the situation and react with all the skill and ferocity that Custodians are renowned for. The Dreadnought's sensory systems are far superior to human perception. Optical sensors that can perceive across multiple spectrums, audio receptors that can detect heartbeats from hundreds of meters away, motion trackers, thermal imaging, even systems designed to detect warp taint. Through these sensors, the Custodian experiences the world around him, but filtered, changed, made distant in ways that no external observer could truly understand. He sees but does not feel. He hears but does not touch. He exists in a state of permanent disconnection from the physical reality he's meant to protect. In terms of pure combat capability, a Contemptor Galatus dreadnought represents a concentration of force that few things in the galaxy can match. It possesses strength sufficient to tear apart light vehicles with its bare manipulators. Its weapons can eliminate heavy infantry with contemptuous ease. Its armor can shrug off firepower that would destroy lesser machines. And guiding all of this power is a warrior who has devoted his entire existence to the perfection of combat arts, who possesses centuries of experience fighting every enemy the Imperium has ever faced. But it's been damaged. It must have been, or it wouldn't be here, lying dormant on a demon world. Perhaps its power systems failed during whatever catastrophe brought it to this place. Perhaps its sarcophagus was damaged, forcing the internal systems to put the Custodian within, into a deep hibernation, to preserve his life. Perhaps exposure to warp energies has disrupted its machine spirit, the artificial intelligence that helps coordinate the Dreadnought's various systems. We don't know the specific nature of its damage, but we know it's not functioning at full capacity, because if it were, this story would have a very different outcome. And now, after however many years or decades, or possibly even centuries, it's been lying here, after existing as just another piece of debris on this nightmare world. It's about to be discovered. The Orks are coming, and they have no idea what they're about to find. How did it get here? The Dreadnought's dark journey. Before the Orks arrive, before the looting and the violence and the chaos that will inevitably follow, we should pause to consider the question of how a Custodian dreadnought ended up on a demon world in the first place. The Adeptus Custodes do not abandon their fallen. They do not lose track of their equipment. Each piece of war gear used by the 10,000 is accounted for with religious devotion. And a Dreadnought, especially one containing a still-living Custodian, would never simply be left behind under normal circumstances. But these were not normal circumstances. The presence of the Dreadnought on a demon world suggests something catastrophic occurred, some series of events so dire that even the vaunted Custodians couldn't prevent this outcome. One possibility is that this demon world wasn't always a demon world. Perhaps, when the Custodian expedition arrived here, this was a normal Imperial world, or at least a world that existed in normal space. The Custodians might have been responding to a distress call, arriving to find the world already under assault by Chaos forces. They would have fought magnificently, as Custodians always do, but even their phenomenal abilities have limits. If the Chaos forces were numerous enough, if demonic entities were already manifesting in large numbers, if the boundary between reality and the warp was already critically weakened, then even the Custodians might have found themselves in an unwinnable situation. During the battle, the Contemptor Galatus would have been in the thick of the fighting, its Galatus warblade reaping a terrible toll among the enemy ranks. But battles against Chaos forces are not won through martial skill alone. The demons would have kept coming, manifesting faster than they could be banished, their numbers sustained by the very violence being done to them. At some critical point, the world itself might have transformed, reality rupturing completely as the demon world was born. In the apocalyptic chaos of that transformation, separated from his brothers, the Dreadnought systems might have failed. Another scenario involves the warp itself. The Custodians might have been traveling through the Imperium, their ship guided by navigators and protected by Geller fields, when disaster struck. Perhaps a warp storm overwhelmed their defenses, tearing the ship apart and scattering its contents across multiple realities. The Dreadnought, somehow surviving the catastrophe intact, might have been deposited on this demon world when the storm finally subsided. In this case, the Custodian within might not even know how much time has passed. Centuries could have elapsed in the material universe, while he experienced only moments of subjective time. There's also the possibility that the Custodians were here deliberately. While the 10,000 normally guard the Imperial Palace on Terra, there are times when the Emperor's needs require them to venture forth. Perhaps they were on a mission to recover something from this demon world, some artifact or piece of knowledge that the Emperor deemed worth the risk. The Dreadnought would have served as mobile artillery support, a walking fortress to anchor their position as they completed their objective. But something went wrong. Maybe they were betrayed. Maybe the opposition was greater than intelligence suggested. Maybe the demon prince who rules this world took a personal interest in preventing their mission's success. Whatever the specific circumstances, the end result was the same. The Custodian Dreadnought was left behind, his brothers either dead or forced to withdraw without him. The exact condition he's in is unclear. His power core might be depleted, running on minimal reserves, just sufficient to keep the Custodian's biological components alive in stasis. His weapon systems could be damaged, the sophisticated targeting computers and ammunition feeds compromised. His armor, though auramite, isn't completely impervious to damage, especially the kind of esoteric harm that warp energies can inflict. There might be rents in his chassis, places where the reality warping environment has managed to corrode or twist his structure. And yet, despite all this, despite the damage and the centuries of exposure to one of the most hostile environments in the galaxy, the Dreadnought endures. This speaks to both the quality of Custodian engineering and the sheer determination of the warrior within. Custodians do not give up. They do not surrender. Even in this twilight state, damaged and alone in hell itself, the Custodian waits. Perhaps he's conscious, experiencing every moment of isolation with crystal clarity. Perhaps he's in suspended animation, his mind dormant until some stimulus triggers reactivation protocols. Either way, he remains, a golden spark of the Imperium's might buried in the corrupted soil of a demon world. The demon world itself would have tried to corrupt or destroy him, of course. Demons might have investigated this strange golden artifact, probing it for weaknesses. The environment, with its reality-warping properties, would have attempted to transform the Dreadnought into something more suitable for this twisted realm. But Oromite resists such corruption remarkably well. And the machine spirit within the Dreadnought, that semi-sentient artificial intelligence that helps coordinate its systems, would have fought against any attempt at possession or subversion. So the Dreadnought remained, neither fully functional nor completely destroyed, neither corrupted nor entirely pure, just waiting for rescue that might never come, waiting for enemies to fight, waiting for any change to the endless, timeless hell of existence on a demon world. And now, finally, after all this time, change is coming. The Orks have arrived, and they're about to discover the most spectacular piece of loot they've ever seen. The Orks arrive. Why greenskins would be here. Now we need to understand why Orks would be on a demon world at all. Most species in the galaxy, even the aggressive ones, have enough survival instinct to avoid demon worlds when possible. These places represent death at best, and fates far worse than death at worst. Even Chaos Space Marines, who serve the Dark Gods, willingly treat demon worlds with a certain degree of caution and respect. They understand what these places are, what they can do to those who let their guard down. Orks, however, are not most species. Orks are unique in the galaxy for their utterly unshakable confidence in their own superiority and their complete inability to feel anything resembling existential dread. Where a human might go mad from exposure to a demon world's reality-warping properties, where an elder might be overcome with horror at the spiritual corruption saturating the environment, an Ork looks at a demon world and thinks, looks like a good scrap. The specific Ork warband that's arrived on this demon world is a ragtag collection of various clans, united under a moderately ambitious warboss named Grokka Smashgit. Grokka's not particularly huge by Ork standards, not yet a warlord commanding millions of boys, but he's big enough and mean enough to keep several hundred Orks following his lead. His warband includes representatives from several of the major Ork clans, each bringing their own particular flavor of violence to the mix. The bad moons in the warband are easy to spot, wearing as much flashy gear as they can acquire, their teeth growing faster than other Orks, and thus making them the richest according to Ork economics. They've managed to accumulate an impressive collection of shooters, big shooters, and even a few def guns, though half of them explode when fired, and the other half only work occasionally. The Evil Sons are identifiable by their red war paint and their obsession with speed, constantly tinkering with their bikes and trucks to make them go faster, which usually works, because if Orks believe red things go faster, then red things do indeed go faster, thanks to their Gestalt psychic field. The Goths present are the biggest and meanest of the bunch, preferring to get stuck in with choppers and combat rather than relying on shooters. They're always spoiling for a fight, constantly challenging each other to headbutting contests and arm wrestling matches to establish dominance hierarchies that last approximately 15 minutes before being challenged again. The Death Skulls, marked by their blue war paint, are the looters par excellence, already eyeing everything on the demon world as potential scrap to be claimed. If it's not nailed down, the Death Skulls will take it. If it is nailed down, they'll take the nails too. And crucially, traveling with this warband are several mech boys, those Orks whose genetic programming gives them an instinctive understanding of technology and engineering. These are the most important Orks for our story, because when they discover the Custodian Dreadnought, their reaction is going to be very different from the simple, wanna fight it response of the average boy. The warband arrived on this demon world through a combination of bad navigation, worse luck, and the typical Ork approach to space travel, which can best be described as point the ship at where you want to go and accelerate until something interesting happens. Their Space Hulk, a massive amalgamation of looted vessels welded together with more enthusiasm than precision, got caught in a warp storm. This would have destroyed most ships. their Geller fields failing and their crews driven mad or killed by demonic possession. But Ork ships are different. They don't rely primarily on Geller fields because Ork technology barely works in the first place, held together by their collective belief that it should work. The Gestalt psychic field that all Orks generate, that WAG energy that makes impossible things possible, acts as a sort of protection. Demons trying to possess Orks often find the experience deeply unsatisfying because Ork minds are so simple and focused on violence that there's nothing interesting to corrupt. An Ork doesn't care about power or knowledge or sensation. An Ork wants to fight. Trying to tempt an Ork with promises of anything other than good scrap is like trying to seduce a brick. So the warp storm battered their hulk but didn't destroy it, and when the storm spat them out, they found themselves in orbit around this demon world. Any sane species would have immediately tried to leave. The Orks looked down at the planet's surface, saw the obvious signs of chaos corruption, noted the demons wandering the landscape, and Warboss Grocker made the obvious decision. They were going down there to fight everything. The initial landing was catastrophic in the entertaining way that Ork landings always are. Several of their ramshackle drop pods crashed into each other mid-descent. One entire mob of boys landed upside down and had to fight their way out of the crater they'd created. A Death Dread landed so hard, it buried itself up to its chest in the screaming ground and had to be dug out by Gretchen. But enough Orks survived the landing to form a decent mob, and they immediately set about exploring their new surroundings with all the caution and tactical awareness you'd expect from creatures whose primary survival strategy is be so tough that whatever tries to kill you breaks itself against your skull. The demon world tried to kill them, of course. The environment itself is hostile, the very air toxic with warp energies that would poison normal humans within hours. But Orks are fungi-based life forms with incredibly resilient physiologies. They shrug off toxins that would kill space marines. The reality-warping properties that make demon worlds so dangerous to other species mostly just confuse Orks, who barely understood how reality was supposed to work in the first place. Demons manifested to attack the intruders, appearing in swirls of warp energy to rend and tear at these new arrivals. The Orks thought this was fantastic. Finally, something to fight. The fact that banishing a demon doesn't truly kill it, merely sending it back to the warp to reform, doesn't bother Orks at all. More enemies just means more fun. The demons, for their part, found fighting Orks a deeply frustrating experience. Normally, mortal creatures feel fear when facing demons, and that fear feeds the demons, making them stronger. Orks don't feel fear. They feel excitement. An Ork facing down a bloodthirster of Horn doesn't think, I'm going to die. He thinks, I'm going to crump that big red git. And if he does die, which he probably will because bloodthirsters are terrifying killing machines, his last thought will likely be, that was a good scrap. So the warband has been on the demon world for a few days now, stomping around, fighting demons, occasionally fighting each other when no daemons are available, and generally having the time of their lives. The mech boys have been particularly busy, examining all the weird and warp-touched artifacts scattered across the landscape. Most of what they find is either completely useless or explodes when touched, but occasionally they discover something interesting. A weapon that shoots bolts of warp lightning, a piece of armor that seems to be alive and screams constantly, a vehicle that runs on pure spite. The Orks haven't been systematically exploring. They don't make plans that sophisticated. They just wander in whatever direction looks like it might have good fighting, claiming whatever loot catches their eye. It's during one of these random wanderings that a mob of about 30 boys, led by a knob named Gutzmak and accompanied by 2 mech boys named Zograt and Bitskrieg, crests a ridge of compacted bone and looks down into a valley where the ground is relatively stable, by Daemon world standards. And there, half buried in the screaming soil, its golden armor still gleaming despite centuries of neglect, is the Contemptor Galatus Dreadnought. The discovery. Ork eyes fall upon golden glory. The moment of discovery doesn't happen with dramatic music or ominous silence. It happens with Gutsmack stopping mid-step, his massive jaw dropping open, and then releasing a bellow of pure orcish joy that echoes across the demon world's twisted landscape. "Oi! Boys, look at the size of that thing!" 30 orc heads swivel to follow his pointing finger. The reaction is immediate and unanimous. Every single orc in the mob lights up with excitement. They've found loot, but not just any loot. The kind of loot that mech boys write songs about, assuming mech boys wrote songs, which they don't because they're too busy building things. But if they did write songs, this would be the subject. The Dreadnought lies at the valley's center, tilted at an angle from where it sank into the unstable ground. From the Orks' vantage point, they can see most of its form: the massive torso housing the sarcophagus, the Galatus warblade still clutched in one hand, the Presidium shield mounted on the other arm. The Auramite armor, though dulled by exposure to the warp, still retains enough of its golden luster to catch the demon world's tormented light. And, most importantly from the Orcs' perspective, it's absolutely massive. Size matters deeply in Orc psychology. The biggest Orcs are the most respected, the most feared, the most likely to become war bosses. This extends to their equipment. A really big gun is inherently better than a smaller gun in Orc thinking, regardless of any other factors. A massive vehicle is superior to a smaller one by virtue of being bigger. And the Dreadnought before them is, by Orc standards, the most beautiful thing they've ever seen. It's huge. It's obviously designed for fighting. It's covered in weapons, and according to mech boy Zograt's professional opinion, delivered between whoops of joy, it's proper Orky it is. This last statement might seem absurd to an outside observer. The Dreadnought is clearly not Orky. It's a pinnacle of Imperial engineering, refined and sophisticated, the very opposite of Orc aesthetic sensibilities. But to Zograt's eyes, shaped by his genetically encoded understanding of technology, he sees something different. He sees the underlying function rather than the form. He sees a massive war machine designed to get into melee combat and crush enemies. That's Orky. He sees weapons systems built for maximum destruction. That's Orky. He sees armor thick enough to shrug off incoming fire. That's definitely Orky. The fact that it's all been executed with Imperium's trademark refinement, rather than Orkish crude enthusiasm, is merely a cosmetic issue, easily solved with enough rivets and red paint. Mechboy Blitzkrieg is already pulling out his tools, a collection of hammers, wrenches, and things that might be welding torches or might be weapons. It's hard to tell with Orc equipment. "We gotta get that down here," he says, his eyes gleaming with the particular light that mech boys get when they've spotted something really good to loot. "Gonna pull it out of the ground, yeah? Then we takes it apart, see how it works, and then we makes it Orky." The rest of the boys are already charging down the hillside, whooping and hollering. Subtlety is not an Orc virtue. They're not sneaking up on the Dreadnought because the concept of sneaking up on a machine doesn't occur to them, and even if it did, they'd consider it unsporting. You approach loot loudly and proudly, demonstrating your worthiness to claim it through sheer aggressive confidence. Gutsmack is the first to reach the Dreadnought, skidding to a halt in front of its partially buried form. Up close, it's even more impressive. The knob is big by human standards, well over 7 feet tall and built like a tank, but the Dreadnought towers over him even in its tilted, half-buried position. The Galatus warblade alone is longer than Gutsmack is tall, its power field inactive, but the weapon still radiating a sense of barely contained lethality. "Look at the size of that chopper," Gutsmack breathes, his voice full of reverence. "And that shield thing. And look, it's got flamers built into the sword. That's dead cunning, that is." The other boys crowd around, jostling for position, each wanting to get a better look at this magnificent find. They're shouting over each other, arguing about whose clan should get credit for discovering it, claiming dibs on various parts of it, and generally creating the kind of raucous chaos that follows Orcs everywhere they go. Zograt and Blitzkrieg shoulder their way through the crowd, approaching the Dreadnought with the focused intensity that mech boys bring to their craft. They begin examining it with professional interest, running their hands over the armor plating, peering into the gaps where components are exposed, trying to understand how this magnificent machine works. "This is good stuff," Zograt mutters, tapping the auramite armor with a wrench. It makes a solid, satisfying thunk. "Real tough. Tougher than anything we got. And look at these seals here, all proper made, nothing leaking." He pauses, his brow furrowing in concentration. Even for a mech boy, this technology is sophisticated. He can understand the basics of what he's looking at, his genetic knowledge giving him instinctive insights into mechanical principles. But the refinement, the precision, the sheer quality of the construction is beyond anything in typical Ork experience. Blitzkrieg is examining the weapon systems, trying to figure out how the Galatus Warblade works. "This chopper's got some kind of energy field generator," he says, pointing to components built into the blade's base. "And these are things here. They must be the juice for the flamers. But I ain't never seen gubbins like this before. It's all like, too neat." This is actually high praise from an Ork mech boy. Ork technology is deliberately crude, built with the understanding that it doesn't need to be pretty, as long as it works. And it works because Orks believe it will work. The machinery inside a typical Ork weapon is a chaotic mess of wires and gears and parts that shouldn't fit together, but do anyway. The Dreadnought's internal components, by contrast, are organized, efficient, optimized. Every part has a purpose, every connection is deliberate. It's the difference between a child's crayon drawing and a master's painting. While the mech boys examine the Dreadnought's exterior, Gutsmack has made his way around to what he correctly identifies as the front. He's staring at the sarcophagus housing, that armored shell at the Dreadnought's core, where the Custodian lies entombed. Unlike the rest of the Dreadnought, the sarcophagus shows no obvious access points. It's sealed, designed to be opened only with the proper tools and knowledge. "Oi!" Gutsmack calls out to the mech boys. "Think something's inside this thing?" Zograt abandons his examination of the leg servos and comes over. He puts his ear against the sarcophagus, listening intently. For a long moment, there's silence. Then his eyes widen. "Yeah," he says slowly. "Yeah, there's something in there. I can hear it, like a heartbeat, but all slow-like." This causes a stir among the boys. Something's alive inside the war machine. That's even better than they thought. Orks have a complicated relationship with the concept of dreadnoughts. They've encountered Space Marine dreadnoughts in battle before and found them to be excellent opponents, tough enough to provide a good fight, dangerous enough to make things interesting. The idea that a warrior could keep fighting even after his body was broken appeals deeply to the Ork love of violence. If anything, Orks think dreadnoughts are one of the few things humans do right, but they've never seen one like this. This is no crude Astartes pattern. This is something more sophisticated, more deadly, more worthy of looting. The discovery that something lives inside it just makes it better. "We gonna wake it up?" one of the boys asks eagerly. "Have a scrap with it?" "No, you git!" Zograt roars, smacking the boy upside the head with his wrench. "If we wakes it up, it'll start fighting, and then it might break itself. We gotta keep it in one piece, so we can loot it proper." This logic makes sense to the assembled Orks. Fighting the thing would be fun, certainly, but looting it is more profitable. And there's something deeply satisfying to the greenskin mind about the idea of taking an enemy's weapon and making it their own. It's the ultimate insult. Not only did we beat you, we're going to use your own gear against your mates. The decision made, the Orks set about the task of extracting the dreadnought from the ground. This proves more challenging than anticipated. The demon world's soil, that screaming, shifting mixture of corrupted matter and crystallized suffering, doesn't want to give up its prize. When the Orks start digging, the ground fights back. Literal hands made of compacted nightmare reach up to grab at their legs. Mouths form in the soil, trying to bite anyone who gets too close. The earth itself seems to resist their efforts, becoming harder and more solid wherever they're trying to dig. The Orks find this hilarious. Of course, the ground's fighting back. This is a demon world. That just makes the work more entertaining. They attack the task with typical Orkish enthusiasm, which is to say they start hitting things with shovels and occasionally with each other. The Gretchen, who have accompanied the mob, are sent scrambling into the holes being dug, their smaller size allowing them to work in spaces where the larger Orks can't fit. The Gretchen complain about this constantly, which the Orks ignore because Gretchen always complain about everything. While the excavation is underway, Mechboy Blitzkrieg is examining the Dreadnought's power core, trying to determine its status. He's managed to pry open a maintenance panel, revealing a nest of cables and crystalline components that manage power distribution. His genetically encoded knowledge is screaming at him that this is extremely advanced technology, far beyond typical Ork standards, but also giving him enough understanding to grasp the basics. "The power thing's almost empty," he announces. "Like really empty. It's got just enough juice to keep the git inside alive, but nothing for moving or fighting." "Can we juice it up?" Zograd asks, not looking away from the excavation he's supervising. "Maybe," Blitzkrieg replies. "Gotta get it back to the workshop first, hook it up to some proper power, see what happens. Might work, might explode. Won't know till we tries it." This is about as good a guarantee as anyone can expect with Ork technology. The plan, such as it is, begins to solidify. They'll dig the Dreadnought out, haul it back to the Warband's main camp where the mech boys have set up their workshops, and then start the process of looting it properly. They'll strip it down, see how it works, keep the good bits, and incorporate them into Ork machines. And if they can get it working again, even better. But as is often the case with Ork plans, things are about to become complicated. Because while the Orks have been busy examining their prize and digging it out, the Dreadnought's systems have been reacting to their presence. The vibrations from the excavation have been detected by internal sensors. The sound of Ork voices has been picked up by audio receptors. And deep within the sarcophagus, in the amniotic tank, where a Custodian's biological remnants float in preservative fluid, consciousness is beginning to stir. Awakening in hell, the Custodian stirs. The return to consciousness is not gentle. For someone who isn't sure how long they've been in stasis, being awakened by the sensation of being dug up while surrounded by Xenos is deeply disorienting. The Custodian's awareness returns in stages, his enhanced mind fighting through layers of hibernation protocols and damaged systems to assess his situation. First comes baseline awareness. He exists, he can think. These basic facts establish themselves before anything else. Then come the sensory inputs, flooding into his consciousness as his connection to the Dreadnought systems re-establishes itself. He's not receiving full data. Too many sensors are damaged or non-functional, but enough work to paint a picture of his surroundings. Optical sensors online, multiple degraded feeds from external cameras. He sees Orks. His brain, shaped by centuries of combat experience and enhanced by the Emperor's own craft, identifies them instantly. Approximately 30 Orks, various subspecies identifiable by their coloration and equipment. They're digging. They're excavating him from whatever he's buried in. No, not excavating. Looting. They're attempting to loot him. Audio sensors functioning at 63% efficiency. The Custodian hears the Orkish voices, that crude, enthusiastic dialect of Low Gothic mixed with their own linguistic peculiarities. They're excited about something. They're arguing about something. They're making plans. Tactical assessment. Immediate combat is inadvisable. His power core is critically depleted, barely, maintaining life support functions. Even if he could activate his weapon systems, which he cannot, he lacks the energy reserves for sustained combat. His armor integrity is compromised in multiple locations, though the Auramite has held better than lesser materials would have. His shield arm's refractor field generator is non-functional. The Galatus Warblade's power feed is offline. Location: unknown. The last thing the Custodian clearly remembers is the memory is fragmented, damaged by whatever trauma landed him here. Battle. There was battle. Demons. So many demons. His brothers falling. Someone ordering a retreat. Then, nothing. A gap in his memory that could represent moments or millennia. And now he's here. Wherever here is. Being dug up by orcs. The situation should be terrifying. He's alone, damaged, powerless, surrounded by Xenos who clearly intend to loot his Dreadnought chassis. But Custodians don't feel fear, not in the way normal humans do. They feel concern, perhaps, recognition that a situation is dangerous, but not fear. Fear is a survival mechanism for mortals who might flee from danger. Custodians were created to never flee. So instead of fear, the Custodian feels only determination. He will survive this. He will escape. He will return to terror, to his duty, to his eternal vigil. But not yet. Not like this. His situation requires careful thought. The Orks don't know he's conscious. They might not even realize he's alive inside the Dreadnought. This gives him an advantage, slim as it might be. If they believe him to be merely a machine, a dead thing to be taken apart, they'll be less cautious. They'll lower their guard. And when an opportunity presents itself, when his power core has had time to recharge even slightly, he can act. But recharging his power core presents its own challenges. The Dreadnought's reactor is a sophisticated piece of technology designed to draw power from multiple sources. It can process standard Imperial fuel cells, convert solar radiation into usable energy, or even tap into specialized power networks when available. But here, on what his sensors are telling him, is definitely a demon world. His options are limited. The ambient energy in the atmosphere is tainted with warp corruption. Using it would risk contamination of his systems, possibly even of his own soul. Unacceptable. No, he needs to be patient. Let the Orks take him wherever they're planning to take him. Let them think they've won a great prize. And when the opportunity comes, when he's had time to recharge and repair what systems he can, he'll show these Xenos exactly why the Custodians are the Emperor's finest. The digging continues. The Custodian can feel it through his chassis, the vibrations of Ork strength and stubborn determination slowly freeing him from the ground. Through his damaged sensors, he watches them work, studying their movements, identifying potential threats. That large one directing the operation, the knob with the mechanical arm, is clearly a leader of sorts. The two with the bizarre tools and measuring implements are mech boys, the Ork equivalent of engineers. They're the ones who will pose the greatest threat, because they'll be the ones examining him most closely, most likely to discover his consciousness. Hours pass. The Orks don't seem to tire, their fungal biology giving them endurance that would shame lesser races. They dig, and they argue, and they occasionally fight each other when disagreements arise, then go back to digging. It's almost admirable in a crude way. These are not sophisticated beings, but they're persistent. Finally, after what the Custodian's internal chronometer estimates as 7 hours and 43 minutes, the Dreadnought is free. The Orks celebrate this achievement by whooping loudly and shooting their weapons into the air, which seems wildly impractical, but entirely in character for the species. Then they set about the task of moving their prize. This proves even more challenging than the excavation. The Contemptor Galitus is massive, weighing several tons even with its power core depleted and various components damaged. The Orks attempt to lift it manually at first, a dozen of them getting underneath and heaving with all their considerable strength. They manage to raise it a few inches before one Ork's footing slips, and the whole thing comes crashing back down, crushing a Gretchen who was standing in the wrong place. The other Gretchens scatter, squealing in alarm, while the Orks just laugh. Eventually, the mech boys devise a solution. They rig up a system of chains and pulleys, attaching them to a nearby rock formation that seems more stable than most features on this demon world. With this mechanical advantage, plus 30 Orks pulling on the chains while bellowing war cries, they manage to drag the Dreadnought onto a massive sled that they've lashed together from pieces of scrap metal and what might be the ribs of some enormous creature. The journey back to the Ork camp takes the rest of the day, the Orks hauling their prize across the demon world's surface. The Custodian uses this time to continue his assessment of the situation. Through his senses, he observes the landscape passing by, cataloguing the corruption he sees. This is definitely a demon world, no question. The reality distortions, the warp taint in the atmosphere, the occasional demon that appears to investigate the commotion. The Orks fight off these demon attacks with cheerful enthusiasm, barely breaking stride in their hauling efforts. As they travel, the Custodian also observes the Orks themselves more closely. These are not the mindless brutes that some Imperial propaganda portrays them as. They're organized, in their crude way. They work together toward a common goal. They demonstrate problem-solving skills, adapting their approach when direct strength proves insufficient. And most importantly, they show signs of that peculiar Ork gestalt psychic field, that wah energy that makes their impossible technology function. The Custodian has fought Orks before, of course. All Custodians have, at various points during their long service, but he's never had the opportunity to observe them this closely, while they believed themselves unobserved. It's educational, in a way. Understanding your enemy is crucial to defeating them, and he will defeat them eventually. But first, he must survive. The Mech Workshop, a place of brutal innovation. The Ork camp, when they finally reach it, is exactly what you'd expect from a race of violent fungus people who've crash-landed on a demon world. It's a chaotic sprawl of tents and crude fortifications, vehicles in various states of repair or dismantlement scattered everywhere, and Orks doing Ork things, fighting each other, shouting at each other, working on equipment, or all three simultaneously. The center of the camp houses what the Orks grandly call their workshop, though that term dignifies it far beyond what it deserves. It's a large open area where the mech boys have set up their operations, surrounded by piles of scrap, half-finished projects, and things that might be tools or weapons, or possibly just interesting chunks of metal that someone thought looked good. There are workbenches, if you can call crudely welded metal tables workbenches. There are furnaces, burning with flames that are probably not supposed to be that color. And there are the mech boys themselves, along with their Gretchen assistants, all working on various projects with more enthusiasm than precision. When the mob returns with their prize, dragging the Contemptor Galatus into the camp on its sled, the reaction is immediate and dramatic. Every Ork in the vicinity stops what they're doing to come look at this magnificent piece of loot. They crowd around, shoving each other for better views, shouting questions and suggestions, arguing about what should be done with it. Warboss Grocker himself emerges from his tent to see what all the commotion is about. Grocker is big, even by Ork standards. Not huge, not a true warlord yet, but certainly an impressive physical specimen, standing almost 8 feet tall and built with the kind of muscle mass that comes from constant fighting and the natural Ork tendency to grow larger as they age and survive combat. He pushes through the crowd with casual authority, Orks parting before him, not out of fear, but out of respect for the hierarchy that says bigger Orks get first pick of everything. He stops in front of the Dreadnought, looking up at it with eyes that gleam with appreciation. "Now dat," he says, his voice a deep rumble, "is a proper piece of loot. Where'd you find it?" Gutsmack explains, in the rambling, enthusiastic way that Orks explain things, about the valley and the discovery and the hours of digging. Grocker listens, nodding along, clearly pleased. This is exactly the kind of find that improves a warboss's reputation among his boys. Not only did his warband find something valuable, but they brought it back intact rather than fighting over it or breaking it in the process of looting it. "Right den," Grocker announces, addressing the crowd. "Dis thing's gonna be the pride of the warband, yeah? We're gonna fix it up, make it Orky, and then we're gonna use it to crump every git what gets in our way. And I'm gonna be the one riding in it." This declaration is met with enthusiastic cheering from most of the Orks present, though a few of the other knobs look somewhat disappointed that they won't get to claim this prize for themselves. But Grocker's decision is final. He's the warboss, He gets first choice, and he's chosen the Dreadnought. The mech boys are already swarming over the Dreadnought, examining it more thoroughly now that they have proper lighting and tools available. Zograt and Blitzkrieg are joined by two other mech boys, Sparkgit and Megabolt, both eager to get their hands on this sophisticated piece of technology. They're taking measurements, sketching crude diagrams, arguing loudly about how various systems work and what needs to be done to make it functional again. First thing, Zograt announces, climbing up onto the Dreadnought's shoulder to address the assembled crowd. We gotta get power flowing again. This thing's got a proper Orky power core, real big and strong, but it's almost dead, so we're gonna hook it up to the generator, juice it up, see what happens. Second thing, Blitzkrieg adds, pointing at the weapon systems. We gotta make sure all the earthy bits still work. The big chopper needs power, them flamers need something to shoot, and that shield thing needs fixing. Plus, we might want to add some more DACA, because you can never have too much DACA. And third, Sparkgit chimes in, having been examining the sarcophagus housing. We gotta figure out what's inside this box thing. Zograt says something's alive in there, so we gotta work out how to open it up, see what it is, and then decide if we keeps it or chucks it out. This last statement causes some debate among the Orks. Some argue that whatever's inside should be left alone, on the grounds that it's obviously been working fine so far, and messing with it might break something. Others argue that they should open it immediately, on the grounds that they want to see what's inside, and not knowing is annoying. A few suggest that they should just hit the sarcophagus with hammers until it opens, which is the Ork solution to most problems that involve something being closed when you want it open. Warboss Grocker makes the decision. Leave it for now, he orders. Get the power going, get the weapons working, make sure the whole thing's solid. Then we worry about what's inside. No point opening it up if the rest of the machine don't work, yeah? This logic satisfies most of the Orks, who begin to disperse now that the immediate excitement of the find is wearing off. They've got their own things to do, fights to pick, squigs to eat, the usual Ork activities. But the mech boys and their Gretchen assistants remain, settling in for what they clearly anticipate will be days or possibly weeks of intensive work. Inside his sarcophagus, the Custodian has been listening to all of this through his audio sensors. His understanding of the Ork language is comprehensive. The Custodians are educated in all the major languages and dialects spoken by the Imperium's enemies. He knows exactly what they're planning. They're going to recharge his power core. They're going to examine his weapons. They're going to try to make him Orky, whatever that means in practice. And then eventually, they're going to open his sarcophagus. This presents both opportunity and danger. Once his power core is recharged, he'll have options he doesn't currently possess. He'll be able to activate weapon systems, engage his shield generator, possibly even power his locomotion systems enough to break free. But the recharging process itself is dangerous. If the Orks don't do it properly, if they try to force too much power too quickly or use contaminated energy sources, they could damage his reactor beyond repair. Worse, they could cause it to overload and detonate, which would certainly kill all the Orks in the immediate vicinity, but would also end his own existence. He needs to be ready to act, but he also needs to be patient. The Custodian focuses his thoughts, running diagnostic routines on what systems he can access, preparing for whatever comes next. His duty is to survive, to return to Terra, to resume his eternal vigil. Everything else is secondary to that duty. The mech boys work through the night, which on a demon world doesn't look significantly different from day. They've set up massive flood lamps around the Dreadnought, powered by a generator that sounds like it's on the verge of exploding at any moment but keeps running anyway through the power of Orkish belief. Under this harsh illumination, they examine every centimeter of the Dreadnought's exterior, taking notes in their crude way, arguing constantly about what they're seeing. Megabolt has taken responsibility for the power core. He's managed to access the main reactor housing, a process that required cutting through several layers of armor that probably weren't meant to be accessed from the outside. What he finds inside fascinates him. The reactor itself is a masterwork of engineering, a fusion cell that operates on principles he only half understands, but instinctively recognizes as being extremely sophisticated. "This thing's amazing," he mutters to himself, running his hands over the reactor's casing. It's like what we builds, but if we knew what we was doing. All neat like, all the bits in the right places." He begins the process of connecting the Dreadnought to the Ork generator. This requires fabricating adapter cables on the spot, welding connections that absolutely should not work, but will work, because Megabolt believes they will work. And that belief, magnified by the Gestalt psychic field of hundreds of Orks in close proximity, makes reality conform to Orkish expectations. He's being careful by Ork standards. He doesn't want to break this magnificent machine. He wants to see it working, wants to understand how it functions, wants to make it even better by adding Orkish modifications. While Megabolt works on power, SparkGit is examining the weapons systems. The Galatas Warblade fascinates him. He's seen power weapons before. Orks make their own versions called power claws that function on similar principles. But the refinement of this blade, the way its power field generator is integrated so seamlessly with the weapon structure, the multiple redundant systems ensuring continuous operation, it's all beyond anything in his experience. "We could learn from this," he says to Blitzkrieg, who's examining the Infernus incinerators built into the blade. Like, really learn. Not just loot it, but work out how it's made. Make our own versions. Blitzkrieg nods, understanding what SparkGit means. Usually when Orks loot enemy equipment, they just use it as is or bolt it onto their existing gear without really understanding how it works. But this Dreadnought is so well made, so sophisticated, that it's inspiring a different approach. They could study it, reverse engineer it, incorporate its principles into future Orkish designs. It's a kind of technology transfer that happens rarely in Ork society, but when it does, it can lead to significant improvements in their capabilities. The WAG field around the camp has been growing stronger ever since the Dreadnought was brought in. This isn't coincidence. The excitement of the find, the anticipation of what they'll be able to do with it, the simple joy that Orks feel when they've gotten their hands on excellent loot, all of this generates psychic energy that feeds into the Gestalt field. And that energy, in turn, makes the mech boys' work easier. Connections that should fail instead hold. Tools that should break instead remain functional. The generator that should have exploded hours ago continues chugging along, pumping power through Megabolt's improvised cables into the Dreadnought's reactor. Inside his sarcophagus, the Custodian feels the change immediately. His power core is receiving energy, actual usable energy, rather than the barely sufficient trickle it's been surviving on. The sensation is relief so profound, it might as well be joy. Not that Custodians permit themselves such emotional indulgence. Systems that have been offline for years or decades or longer begin to wake up. Redundant circuits activate. Backup protocols initialize. His connection to the Dreadnought's machine spirit, that artificial intelligence that helps coordinate the chassis, strengthens. But he doesn't activate anything yet. He just lets the power flow in, storing it, building up reserves, preparing. The mech boys are watching for signs of activation. They've got Gretchen stationed around the Dreadnought with instructions to yell if anything starts glowing or moving. But the Custodian is too experienced, too disciplined to give himself away like that. He accepts the power silently, invisibly, building strength for when the moment comes. Hours pass. The power core charge reaches 15%, 20%, 30%. The mech boys start getting excited, seeing readings on their crude instruments that tell them the reactor is responding to their input. They begin discussing what to do next, whether they should try to activate some systems, test the weapons, see if they can get the Dreadnought to move. And then, something unexpected happens. The Demon world, which has been relatively quiet since the Orks arrived, decides to express its displeasure at their presence. The ground begins to shake. The sky, already a nightmare of wrong colors and impossible geometries, darkens further. Warp energy begins concentrating in the atmosphere, building towards some kind of event that won't be pleasant for anyone involved. The Orks notice, of course. They're not subtle, and neither is the demon world's attack. Demons begin manifesting across the camp, appearing in bursts of warp energy, their forms twisted and terrible. These aren't minor demons either. These are significant threats. Bloodletters of Khorne, plague-bearers of Nurgle, demonettes of Slanesh, all materializing simultaneously in what's clearly a coordinated assault. The camp erupts into chaos, which, honestly, is only slightly more chaotic than normal for an Ork camp. The Orks respond to this demonic assault the way Orks respond to everything, with violence and enthusiasm. They grab whatever weapons are handy and throw themselves into combat, whooping and hollering, delighted by this unexpected entertainment. But the attack is serious. The demon world wants these intruders gone, and it's committing real resources to making that happen. More demons keep appearing, faster than the Orks can banish them. The battle spreads across the camp, Orks and demons locked in brutal melee, neither side giving ground. And in the workshop area, surrounded by this chaos, the Contemptor Galatus Dreadnought sits quietly, its power core now charged to 50%, more than enough for what needs to be done. The Custodian inside has been waiting for an opportunity, and now, with the Orks distracted by battle, with attention focused elsewhere, that opportunity has arrived. It's time to wake up. The Golden Warrior rises. The first indication the mech boys get that something has changed is when the Dreadnought's optical sensors suddenly light up, brilliant gold illumination flooding from the eye slits in its faceplate. Sparkgit, who's been standing next to the chassis examining a power coupling, freezes in place, his enhanced Ork survival instincts screaming at him that he's suddenly in very serious danger. Then, the Contemptor Galatus moves. After years or decades of stillness, the Dreadnought rises. Servos engage with a sound like thunder. Hydraulics that have been dormant for so long suddenly surge with power. The massive war machine straightens up to its full height, towering above even the largest Orks present, and the very ground seems to shake from the force of its awakening. The Galatus Warblade, which has been lying inactive on the ground where the mech boys placed it, suddenly ignites with a brilliant blue-white power field. The energy surrounding the blade crackles and spits, reality itself seeming to flinch away from the weapon's edge. The twin Infernus incinerators, built into the blade housing, come online, their pilot lights flickering with barely restrained flame. The Presidium shield, though its refractor field remains non-functional, is swept up in the Dreadnought's other hand, held with perfect martial precision. Even without its energy field, the massive shield remains a formidable defensive tool, Auramite strong enough to stop anything short of dedicated anti-armor weapons. And through the Dreadnought's Vox speakers, amplified to battlefield volume, comes a voice. Not a crude Orkish bellow or a mechanical monotone, but a voice of absolute authority, refined and cold as winter, carrying the weight of centuries of service and unwavering duty. I am Valoris Kael, Shield Captain of the Adeptus Custodes, Sentinel of Terror, Guardian of the Emperor's Trust. You have laid hands upon the property of the Emperor himself. This transgression ends now. The effect on the Orks is immediate and varied. Some of them, particularly the younger boys, who've never faced anything quite this terrifying, actually take a step back. This is the exact opposite of the normal Ork response to danger, which is to move toward it enthusiastically. But there's something about this Golden Warrior, this ancient killing machine suddenly awakening in their midst, that triggers even their limited sense of self-preservation. The mech boys have a different reaction. They're not backing away, they're practically vibrating with excitement. The thing they've been working on, the prize they've been trying to understand and repair, has just activated on its own. It's working. Sort of. Admittedly, it's working in a way that suggests it's about to start killing them, but still, it's working. This is the most fascinating thing that's happened to them in years. Warboss Grocker, currently engaged in battle with a bloodthirster about 30 meters away, hears the commotion and turns to see the Dreadnought standing. For a moment, just a moment, his usual confidence wavers. That's a really big and clearly very angry war machine. Then his Ork nature reasserts itself, and he grins, showing all of his massive fangs. "Oi!" he bellows across the battlefield. "Don't nobody killed a gold thing. I call dibs on dat." But Valoris Kale, shield captain of the Adeptus Custodes, has no intention of being anyone's property. His priority analysis is clear: survive, escape, return to Terra. Secondary objective: cause maximum disruption to enemy forces to facilitate escape. The fact that the camp is currently under attack by demons actually helps his situation. The Orks are distracted. He can use that. He takes his first step in years, and the Dreadnought responds perfectly despite the damage it's sustained. The Custodian's mind and the Dreadnought's machine spirit work in harmony, their connection enhanced by the Custodian's superior cognitive abilities and the machine spirit's sophisticated programming. This isn't like controlling a vehicle. This is more intimate than that. The Dreadnought is his body now, has been for longer than he cares to remember, and moving it feels as natural as breathing once felt. His second step takes him forward, toward the edge of the workshop area. Sparkgit, showing more courage than sense, tries to block his path, raising a massive wrench in what might be a threatening gesture, or might just be Sparkgit, not knowing what else to do with his hands. Valoris doesn't slow down. The Presidium shield sweeps out in a measured arc, catching the mech boy and sending him flying 20 meters to crash into a pile of scrap metal with a satisfying crunch. 3 Ork boys, seeing their mech boy attacked, charge in with the kind of fearless aggression that defines their species. Their bellowing war cries, raising their choppers, fully committed to the fight. Valoris lets them close to melee range, then activates the Infernus incinerators. Twin streams of flame erupt from the Galatus warblade, washing over the charging Orks. These aren't normal flames. These are plasma-heated death, hot enough to reduce ceramite to molten slag, sustained by power cells that can maintain the stream for extended periods. The Orks don't die quietly, they die screaming, their bodies immolating in seconds, their crude armor melting and fusing with their flesh before that too catches fire and burns to ash. The display serves its purpose, establishing that attacking him is a fatal mistake. The Orks, who were thinking about charging in, reconsider their position. The mech boys, who were thinking about trying to shut him down somehow, realize that approach is unlikely to end well, and Valoris takes advantage of this hesitation to assess his situation more thoroughly. He's surrounded by Orks, hundreds of them across the camp. He's on a demon world, meaning escape will require more than simply walking away. His power core, while recharged to a usable level, won't sustain prolonged high-intensity combat. His weapon systems are functional but running on minimal reserves. His shield's refractor field remains offline. Multiple systems are damaged or non-functional. In short, he's in terrible shape, vastly outnumbered, and deep in enemy territory. But he's a custodian. Being in terrible situations is what they train for. The demons attacking the camp have noticed him now. Of course they have. An activated Custodian Dreadnought radiates, the Emperor's light even in this darkest of places, a beacon of order and authority in a realm of chaos. A pack of bloodletters changes direction mid-charge, abandoning their Ork opponents to rush toward this new, more tempting target. Valoris meets them head-on. The Galatus warblade sweeps through the first demon with contemptuous ease, the power field disrupting the warp stuff that comprises its physical form and sending it shrieking back to the Imperium. The second bloodletter manages to close to striking range, its hellblade crackling with unholy energy as it swings toward the Dreadnought's torso. The Presidium shield interposes with perfect timing, the auramite construction absorbing the blow that would have damaged lesser armor. Valoris follows up with a shield bash that crushes the demon's skull. The physical force combined with the residual blessings worked into the auramite, proving lethal even to warp-spawned entities. The remaining bloodletters try to surround him, a sound tactic against a single opponent. But Valoris has fought demons for longer than most mortal races have existed. He knows their tactics, their strengths, their weaknesses. The Dreadnought pivots with surprising grace for something so massive. The Galatus warblade, describing perfect arcs that keep the demons at bay, while the Infernus incinerators sweep periodically, to deny them any approach vectors. The Orks, to their credit, don't sit idle during this display. Some of them join in attacking the demons because, from their perspective, this is just more enemies to fight. Others start shooting at Valoris, their shooters and big shooters spattering the Dreadnought's armor with rounds that mostly bounce off, but occasionally find gaps where they can cause minor damage. A few mech boys are already running calculations, trying to figure out how to disable the Dreadnought without destroying it completely. And Warboss Grocker, having dispatched his bloodthirster opponent with a power claw to the face, is striding toward the workshop area with clear purpose. He's decided this situation needs his personal attention. Valoris notes the Warboss's approach through his sensors. This is a threat that can't be ignored. Orc Warbosses don't become Warbosses by being weak or stupid. They rise to their positions by being the biggest, the meanest, and the cleverest fighters in their warbands. Grocker looks like he stands about 8 feet tall, wears heavy armor that's been welded together from various sources, and carries weapons that could threaten even a Dreadnought. The shield captain makes a tactical decision. He can't win this fight. Not here, not now, not in his current condition. His power reserves are already dropping from the combat he's engaged in. His weapons are functional, but not at full capacity. He's surrounded by hundreds of enemies, with more arriving constantly. Fighting here means death. And while custodians don't fear death, they also don't waste their lives unnecessarily. He needs to disengage. He needs to create distance between himself and the Orc force. And then he needs to figure out how to escape this demon world entirely, which is a problem he'll address once he's not in immediate danger of being overwhelmed. Valoris makes his move. The Dreadnought surges forward, not toward Grocker, but away from him, using the Warboss's approach as a distraction. The Galatus Warblade cuts through any Orc foolish enough to try blocking his path. The Infernus Incinerators clear corridors through the mob, creating temporary gaps in the encirclement. He's not trying to fight his way through. He's trying to break through, using momentum and shock value to overwhelm the Orc's ability to respond. It nearly works. He gets 20 meters from the workshop area, then 30, carving a bloody path through the camp. Demons and Orcs alike fall before his advance, neither group particularly caring about the other when there's this golden target to focus on. His power reserves drop to 40%, then 35, then 30. The Dreadnought's machine spirit sends warning alerts about component stress, systems operating beyond safe parameters, potential cascade failures if current activity continues. And then Grocker catches up. The Warboss doesn't tackle Valoris exactly, because that would be stupid even by Orc standards. Instead, he positions himself directly in the Dreadnought's path and sets his feet, raising his power claw in a guard position. When Valoris tries to continue his charge, Grocker meets the Dreadnought head-on with all the strength an 8-foot Orc can bring to bear. The collision is tremendous. Valoris weighs several tons. Grocker weighs considerably less, but makes up for it with sheer bloody-mindedness and Orcish refusal to be moved. The force of their meeting sends shockwaves through the ground, cracks appearing in the demon world's unstable surface. Both combatants are driven backward by the impact, the Dreadnought's momentum arrested, Grocker's boots leaving deep furrows in the ground. For a moment, they stand facing each other. The ancient Custodian warrior in his golden mechanical shell, damaged and diminished, but still formidable. The Orc Warboss, young by Greenskin's standards, but already massive, standing his ground against something that outweighs him 4-1. Around them, the battle rages on, Orcs and demons tearing into each other with abandon. But in this space, this moment, it's just these two. "Oi," Grocker says, his voice carrying clearly despite the chaos around them. "That's my new ride you're stealing." Valoris's response comes through the Vox speakers, cold and emotionless. "This chassis bears the Emperor's mark. It will never serve Xenos filth." "Yeah, well, we'll see about that," Grocker replies, and charges. What follows is one of the most unusual combats in the history of either species. A Custodian Dreadnought, even a damaged one, represents a concentration of martial skill and technological superiority that can dominate most battlefields. An Ork war boss, especially one in the full flush of his power, embodies brute force and unconquerable determination that can overcome almost any opposition. When these two forces meet, the result is spectacular. The Galatus Warblade crashes against Grokka's Power Claw, both weapons screaming as their power fields interact. Sparks spray in every direction, the air itself seeming to crack under the stress. Grokka takes a step back, pushed by the Dreadnought's superior strength, then plants his feet and pushes back. To Valoris's surprise, he doesn't simply give way. The Ork is strong, unbelievably strong, leveraging every bit of his mass and muscle to resist. Valoris brings the Presidium shield around in a sideswipe that should cave in Grokka's skull. The warboss ducks under it with agility that seems impossible for something his size, then lunges forward inside the Dreadnought's guard. His power claw latches onto the Dreadnought's torso, the energy field digging into the Auramite armor. Warnings flash across Valoris's consciousness. Armor breach detected. Hull integrity compromised. Power claw attempting to tear through external plating. The Infernus incinerators come online. Point-blank range, engulfing Grokka in flames. Any normal creature would be instantly immolated. The warboss roars, more in irritation than pain. His heavy armor protecting him from the worst of the heat, though his skin is definitely burning where it's exposed. He doesn't let go. He just keeps pulling, trying to tear a chunk out of the Dreadnought's chassis. Valoris drives the Dreadnought forward, using his mass advantage, trying to crush the warboss against the ground. Grokka goes down, still holding on, his power claw now pulling pieces of armor plating free. Other Orks, seeing their warboss engaged in single combat, start circling, waiting for an opening to join the fight. Daemons, attracted by the concentration of violence, also close in, seeing both combatants as targets. The situation is becoming untenable. Valoris makes a calculation. He can't win this fight. His power reserves are at 20% and dropping fast. His armor is compromised. He's surrounded by enemies on all sides. If he continues this battle, he will be destroyed. The Custodian temperament recoils at the idea of retreat, but temperament doesn't override tactical reality. He activates the Infernus incinerators at maximum output, not targeting Grokka specifically, but washing the entire area in flames. The fuel reserves drain precipitously, but the effect is immediate. Everything within 5 meters is suddenly on fire. Orks scatter, demons shriek, and Grokka, finally having enough of being set on fire, releases his grip on the Dreadnought's torso and rolls away. Valoris doesn't hesitate. He uses the momentary opening to disengage, turning away from the warboss and accelerating into the crowd of Orks. He's not trying to fight his way through anymore. He's trying to escape, pure and simple, using every bit of remaining power to build speed. The Orks try to stop him. They throw themselves in his path. They shoot at him. They attach improvised grappling hooks to try and slow him down. But momentum is on his side, and the Dreadnought's weight and strength carry him through. He breaks clear of the camp's edge, entering the demon world's wilderness. Behind him, he can hear Grokka bellowing orders, coordinating pursuit. The Orks aren't going to let their prize escape without a chase. But Valoris has bought himself time and distance, which is all he needs for now. He runs, or rather, the Dreadnought approximation of running, a ground-eating stride that covers significant distance with each step, despite the damage to his locomotive systems. His power reserves drop to 15%, then 10%. Warnings cascade through his consciousness, systems crying out for maintenance and repair. But he doesn't stop. He can't stop. Behind him, the Ork camp dissolves into organized chaos as they mobilize for pursuit. Ahead of him lies the demon world's twisted landscape, full of dangers, but at least offering the possibility of escape. And within his sarcophagus, Valoris Kael allows himself the smallest sensation of satisfaction. He's alive. He's free. And while his situation is still desperate, he's survived worse. The hunt is on. The chase. Orks in pursuit. Across hell itself. The demon world doesn't care about the personal drama playing out on its surface. It continues being a nightmare realm, regardless of whether anyone's paying attention. But the chase that's now unfolding across its twisted landscape is remarkable enough that even the demons pause to watch. An Adeptus Custodes Dreadnought being pursued by an Ork warband across a demon world. If the Imperium has historians that survive long enough to record this event, they'll struggle to categorize exactly which type of catastrophe this represents. Valoris's initial advantage is speed. A dreadnought, even a damaged one, can move quickly when necessary. The Contemptor pattern was designed to be more mobile than standard dreadnoughts, capable of keeping pace with Custodian Guard on the advance. That mobility serves him now as he puts distance between himself and the Ork camp, each stride covering ground that would take normal infantry several seconds to cross. But the Orks aren't slow either. Grokka's warband includes plenty of speed freaks, those Orks obsessed with going fast, and they immediately deploy their bikes and trucks in pursuit. The vehicles that were scattered around camp, half dismantled or in various states of repair, are hastily made functional through the application of mechboy expertise and the WH40K's reality warping influence. Engines that shouldn't work roar to life, wheels that should fall off stay attached, and within minutes of Valoris's escape, a convoy of Ork vehicles is racing after him. The terrain doesn't help anyone. The demon world surface is unpredictable at best and actively hostile at worst. Valoris navigates by dead reckoning and his dreadnought's sensors, avoiding the most obviously dangerous features. A canyon that seems to breathe, a forest of crystallized screams that cuts anything that touches it, a plain where the ground randomly switches between liquid and solid states. But avoiding these hazards slows him down, and the Orks behind him are gaining. What Valoris needs is defensible ground, somewhere he can make a stand with tactical advantage, where the Orks' numbers count for less. His sensors scan the landscape ahead, the dreadnought's machine spirit analyzing topography and suggesting potential positions. There, about 2 kilometers ahead, a structure, ancient, pre-corruption, clearly of Imperial origin, though so warped by warp exposure that its original purpose is unclear. But it's solid, relatively speaking, and offers potential defensive positions. He adjusts course, vectoring toward the structure. His power reserves are at 8% now. The machine spirit is sending increasingly urgent warnings about critical system failures if current energy expenditure continues. He reduces speed slightly, prioritizing endurance over velocity. The Orks will catch up eventually anyway. Better to reach the structure with enough power to fight than to get there and collapse immediately. Behind him, the Ork pursuit is having its own challenges. One of their trucks drives straight into a patch of demon world surface that decides to become sentient right at that moment, the ground literally reaching up to grab the vehicle and pull it down into itself. The Orks in the truck escape by jumping off before they're dragged under, but the vehicle is lost. A bike suffers a more traditional fate, hitting a rock at high speed and launching its rider a spectacular distance through the air. The rider survives the landing because Orks are incredibly tough, but he's now on foot and far behind the main chase. Grokka himself is riding in the lead truck, standing in the back, one hand gripping a roll bar for stability, while the other waves his power claw for emphasis as he shouts encouragement and insults at the fleeing dreadnought. "You can't run forever, you golden git. We're gonna catch you, and Dan, you're gonna be my new ride, whether you likes it or not." The mech boys are also in pursuit, particularly Zograt and Blitzkrieg, both riding in the same vehicle and arguing loudly about the best way to disable a dreadnought without destroying it completely. Their discussion is technically sophisticated, covering topics like optimal targeting points for electromagnetic pulses and the vulnerability of power coupling systems, but it's delivered in Ork dialect and punctuated with threats about who gets to take credit when they finally capture this magnificent prize. Valoris reaches the structure with his power reserves at 6%. It's clearly been some kind of Imperial facility once, possibly a monitoring station or small garrison. The corruption has warped it significantly. Walls lean at angles that physics shouldn't permit. Doorways open onto spaces that are larger on the inside than the outside. But the fundamental structure remains, Oromite-reinforced walls that even demonic corruption hasn't completely destroyed. He enters through what used to be the main entrance, now a gaping wound in the structure's side where the doors have been torn away. Inside, the corruption is even more evident. The air has a texture to it, almost solid, resisting movement. The floors are covered with something that might be organic material or might be solidified despair. It's hard to tell. But there are defensible positions here. Narrow passages where the Orcs' numbers won't help them. Elevated positions where he can use height advantage. He positions himself in what used to be a central chamber, now a space where geometry has given up pretending to make sense. From here, he has sight lines to multiple approach routes. His back is to a wall that seems more solid than most. The Galatus Warblade remains active, its power field humming, though he's reduced the Infernus incinerators to pilot light status to conserve fuel. The Presidium shield is raised, ready, and he waits. 6% power remaining. Maybe 15 minutes of high-intensity combat before complete shutdown. It will have to be enough. The first Orcs arrive within 2 minutes, bikes skidding to stops outside the structure as their riders dismount and prepare to assault. They're not stupid enough to charge blindly into an unknown building where a Dreadnought is waiting. They fan out, covering multiple entrances, calling to each other in their crude language to coordinate their approach. Some of them fire test shots into the structure, their bullets ricocheting off corrupted metal and Oromite with equal results. When Grokka's truck arrives, bringing the war boss and the mech boys, the assault begins in earnest. The Orcs don't have a sophisticated plan. They have an Orc plan, which is to say they're going to rush in from multiple directions and overwhelm the target through sheer numbers and violence. It's a plan that works surprisingly often, mainly because it's executed with such complete commitment that enemies don't have time to properly respond. Valoris is ready. The first wave of Orcs that enters through the eastern approach finds themselves funneled into a corridor barely wide enough for 2 of them to move abreast. The Galatus Warblade sweeps through this confined space with devastating efficiency, each swing cleaving through Orc bodies with contemptuous ease. The Dreadnought's positioning means the Orcs can't flank or surround him. They can only come at him from predictable angles. It's a meat grinder, and the Orcs are the meat, but they keep coming. That's the thing about Orcs. They don't break, they don't root. Every one that falls is immediately replaced by another, and another, and another. They're taking catastrophic casualties, but they don't care. This is what they live for, this kind of brutal, close-quarters violence where individual skill matters less than pure determination. Grokka, watching from outside, quickly realizes this approach isn't working. "Stop feeding them to the chopper one at a time, you gits," he bellows. "We gotta use our heads." By which he means they need to be clever about this, not just charging stupidly. Which is ironic coming from an Orc. But Grokka hasn't become warboss by being entirely stupid. He orders the mech boys to assess the situation. Zograt and Blitzkrieg approach the structure cautiously, examining its walls and foundations, looking for weaknesses they can exploit. The corruption that's warped this building has made it structurally unsound in places. If they can identify the right load-bearing walls and take those out, the whole structure might collapse. It would probably damage the Dreadnought, but they can repair damage. What they can't repair is something that's been completely destroyed by fighting. Meanwhile, Grokka himself enters through the main entrance, power claw ready, armor scorched from his previous encounter, but still functional. He's not trying to be sneaky, he's trying to be a challenge, drawing the Dreadnought's attention away from the Orcs, who are dying in droves in that eastern corridor. "Oi, golden boy!" he shouts, his voice echoing through the corrupted structure. "Let's do this proper like. You and me, one-on-one, winner takes all." Valoris doesn't respond verbally. He doesn't owe this Xenos any courtesy, but he does reassess his position. The warboss's arrival changes the tactical calculus. That eastern corridor can be temporarily abandoned while he addresses this more significant threat. He pulls back from his previous position, moving deeper into the structure's interior, forcing Grokka to follow him into terrain that's even more unstable. The warboss pursues, without hesitation. This is what he wanted. A proper scrap with a worthy opponent. The other orcs can handle the smaller fights. This is war boss business. When he catches up to Valoris in what used to be some kind of command center, he grins, showing all his massive fangs. "There you are. Thought you was gonna run again." "I do not run," Valoris replies, his vox speakers making his voice echo strangely in this corrupted space. "I make tactical withdrawals to more favorable positions." "That's just running with extra words," Grocker observes, and charges. Their second engagement is even more violent than the first. In this confined space, with better footing than the Demon World surface provided, both combatants can leverage their full capabilities. Grocker's power claw seeks the same spot it found before, the breach in the Dreadnought's armor plating. Valoris denies him this, the Presidium shield interposing constantly, forcing the warboss to work for every strike. The Galatus, Warblade, crashes against Grocker's armor, seeking vulnerable points, testing the Orcs' defenses. But Grocker is fast, faster than something his size should be, ducking and weaving with surprising grace. The power claw scores a hit on the Dreadnought's leg, tearing through secondary armor and damaging the knee joint's motivator. Valoris staggers, but doesn't fall, using the Presidium shield as a third point of contact to maintain stability. Power reserves, 4%. Systems critical, warnings cascading faster than Valoris can process them. He's running out of time. Outside, the mech boys have found what they're looking for. A section of wall where the warp corruption has made the structure brittle, where the auramite reinforcement has been compromised by centuries of exposure. They position a demolition charge, something they've cobbled together from various explosives they had on hand. It's crude, it's dangerous, and it might destroy more than they intend. But it'll bring down that wall, and hopefully part of the interior structure with it. "Ready?" Zograt asks Blitzkrieg. "Yeah, but what if it collapses the whole thing and smashes the Dreadnought? Then we get to rebuild it from scrap, innit? Still gotta be better than letting it get away." They trigger the charge. The explosion is tremendous, far larger than even the mech boys expected. The demolition charge was apparently more powerful than they calculated, or maybe the structure's instability made it more susceptible to collapse, or maybe the Demon World itself decided this was a good moment to be dramatic. Whatever the reason, a significant portion of the building comes down in a cascade of corrupted metal and auramite and debris. Inside, Valoris and Grocker are both caught by the collapse. The Dreadnought's sensors detect the incoming debris and he tries to move, but the damaged leg servo limits his mobility. Chunks of building material crash down onto him, onto Grocker, onto everything in the chamber. Dust and corruption fill the air, visibility dropping to near zero. When the dust settles, the structure is significantly less intact than it was. The Orcs outside cautiously approach what's left, trying to see if their prize survived. For a long moment, there's no movement from within. Then, slowly, pieces of debris begin to shift. Valoris emerges from the rubble, his Dreadnought chassis covered in dust and scoring, multiple new points of damage visible on his armor. His power reserves have dropped to 2% during the collapse, barely enough to maintain life support. His weapon systems are offline to conserve energy. He's functionally defeated, unable to continue fighting. 10 meters away, Grocker also emerges from the debris, pulling himself up through sheer bloody-minded determination. He's injured, one arm hanging limp, his armor cracked in multiple places, green blood oozing from wounds all over his massive frame. But he's grinning. "Heh, that was a good scrap." Valoris assesses his options. They're severely limited. He could try to fight, but without power for his weapons, he'd be reduced to using the Dreadnought's physical strength alone, and even that would drain his reserves within minutes. He could try to run, but with the damaged leg servo and depleted power, he wouldn't get far. For the first time in longer than he can remember, Shield Captain Valoris Kale faces the possibility that he might not escape this situation. The other Orcs are closing in now, surrounding the collapsed structure, weapons ready. Mech boys are approaching with their tools, eager to finally get their hands on this magnificent machine now that it's been subdued. Grocker limps over to the Dreadnought, looking up at it with clear satisfaction, despite his injuries. "So here's how this is gonna work," the warboss says. "You're gonna stop fighting, yeah? And we're gonna take you back to camp and fix you up proper-like, make you orky, and then I'm gonna ride around in you, stomping gits and having a proper good time. Or," and here Grocker's voice takes on a harder edge, "we can keep fighting until something breaks what can't be fixed, and then all we got's is scrap. Your choice, golden boy." Valorous considers this ultimatum. His duty is clear: survive, preserve the Emperor's property, return to Terra. Fighting to complete destruction serves none of these objectives. Allowing himself to be captured, to be looted by Xenos, violates every principle he was trained to uphold. But if he's still alive, still conscious, then there's still the possibility of eventual escape. The dead serve no purpose. "Your proposal is noted," Valorous says finally, his voice cold even through the Vox speakers. "But understand this, Xenos. My compliance is temporary. The first opportunity that presents itself, I will resume my escape, and any orc who stands between me and my duty will die." Grocker's grin widens. "Yeah, that's what I thought you'd say. Makes it more interesting, don't it? Come on, boys. Let's get this thing back to camp." And so, for the second time in as many days, the Contemptor Galatus Dreadnought is transported to the Orc camp, though this time as a captured prize rather than mere salvage. Shield Captain Valoris Kael, one of the Emperor's finest warriors, has been defeated and captured by Orks on a demon world. The situation could hardly be more absurd or more terrible, and yet both combatants seem oddly satisfied with this outcome. The Orks have their prize, and Valorous has survived to fight another day. What happens next will depend on how the mech boys decide to proceed with their looting, and whether the Custodian can find an opportunity to escape before they do something irreversible. But that's a story for another time. If the Emperor is merciful, though mercy and demon worlds are concepts that rarely coexist. Like and subscribe for more deep dives into the dark corners of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, where the grim darkness of the far future somehow still finds room for the occasional bit of darkly comedic chaos.